Christine Sandberg became obsessed with hermit crabs in the summer of 2013. She spent that summer on the Jersey Shore and saw hundreds of hermit crabs huddled in wire cages. It had been many years since she'd even thought about hermit crabs. Then she remembered the lone hermit crab of her childhood that she purchased from similar conditions. Sadly, it didn't last long. But at that time, she didn't know what she was doing. Fast forward to 2013, and Christine wondered what actually makes for good care for these interesting critters. So she researched and stumbled upon the HCA. She read everything she could and participated in the forums for 4 years before finally adopting her own 6 purple pinchers in the summer of 2017. Since then, she's been sharing her hermit crab journey on Instagram as @Christine's Crab Care. Last year's CrabCon was the final encouragement she needed to open up her own Etsy shop, selling hermit crab food and fun novelty items. She's currently elbow deep in a tank renovation and hopes to be able to take in more rescue hermit crabs very soon. Please welcome Christine Sandberg.
Hello, CrabCon friends! My name is Christine from Christine's Crab Care, and I am so excited to be here at this year's CrabCon, virtually again, and also have the opportunity to show you and tell you more about my hermit crab build. Hello everyone, welcome to my presentation, Extreme Makeover Crabitat Edition. Let's get started. First, you have to know what I was working with originally. So we're going to have a bit of a Princess Diaries moment here. And on the left-hand side, this is the very first Crabitat I put together many years ago. Let's see, that was 2017, and this was in my apartment. And then on the right-hand side is a different tank. This is the first tank I quickly threw together when we moved. So I put together this tank, moved the crabs over from my apartment to my house, and then decommissioned this tank on the left and put it in storage with the goal of making a crab mansion. And that's what this presentation is about today. So these are 2 different tanks, just to clear that up. And we're going to have a Princess Diaries moment here. Voila! Ta-da! So here's the tank in all its glory. This was taken a few days ago in May 2022. Just for reference, timing will be important in this presentation. All right, and then I have a video so you can see the close-up of it. If you have not had the opportunity to see my tank before, I have posted many pictures and some video on my Instagram account, Christine's Crab Care, but in case you haven't seen that, here's a video for you. So in today's presentation, you will see the process of my building the Crabitat. you're going to get a detailed list of every material I used in this project. And hopefully you will gain valuable insight from my experience about what I learned and what I would do differently. Okay, here's my mandatory disclaimer on this. Please, please, please use caution when attempting a tank build. Proceed at your own risk. Children and minors, please get your parents to help. Use proper protection, eye protection, ventilation, gloves, etc. Whatever makes sense for you. Finally, crab keepers are learning new methods and new things about our crabs all the time, so please note that what worked for me here may or may not be the best practice at the time of your build. So please do additional research before attempting a Crabitat build like this. And lastly, I'm not original owner of any of these ideas. I have just compiled ideas and feedback from others that other crab keepers have shared over the past 9 years that I've been in the hermit crab community. So I'm not taking original credit for any of this. I just made it mine. All right, everyone wants to know how big it is. How big is the tank? So let's start off with some basics. Here's the total size. It is roughly 95 US gallons, or 359 liters. Huh? I tried for our international friends. All right. So the breakdown here is the bottom tank. I was told it's a 55. I used the measurements and it's like 51. So let's just go with 55 gallon. I buy all my crab tanks used. Around me, I've had pretty good luck on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist or Let Go or one of those apps. So the top tanks are upside down on this bottom tank, and the left one and the right one are terrariums that have front-facing doors, and these are both upside down. And then that middle one is a 20-gallon aquarium that's also upside down. And I had this one and I had this one for my first tank, and then I bought this one and this one, again, both used. That's why they slightly different, don't match. I don't know if people notice that when I just share a picture, but anyway, try not to let it bother me. Okay, the next question that people have usually is how they're supported and how they're staying up there. So, best way I can describe this is it's two clamshells that are like this. They are just sitting on each other's rim. So this is a top-down view, not to scale, but here the white part is the bottom and the black part's the top. So you can see that they're just resting on the rim of the bottom tank. And I did this with the 20-gallon in my first tank. It's very secure. Yeah, it would take a lot to knock it down. So, and that is because I have put Velcro, heavy duty Velcro, along the entire rim and perimeter of the tank. And it takes quite a bit of muscle to move the topper off of there with just the Velcro. And then I also sealed the outside with duct tape for reasons we'll get into later when I talk about what I learned. All right, here is a monthly maintenance video because everyone asks, how do you get to the inside? How do you get inside there? So this is a video of time lapse. Some things were cut off because of camera issues, but this is what I do once a month. And then of course I just, do other things weekly or whatever, but this is what it looks like to do my monthly maintenance. Enjoy. So as you can see, really important part of my maintenance care routine is long tongs, and I use those to reach things that normally would be difficult. And these toppers are removable, so if push comes to shove, I can remove them, and you'll see that later on too. let's get building. Here's the process that I would recommend for building. First, you want to plan, design, and draw out exactly what you want your tank to look like. I thought I did this, and then I kept changing the plan, so it kept taking longer. But try to, do your best to get as much inspiration as you can all at once, and yeah, so then you don't have to change the plan later. All right, number 2, gather all your supplies. This is super important. I have a supply list you want to save this URL because it's going to be active post CrabCon. So if you bought a basic ticket, you will not have access to this talk again for a while, at least 1 year. And if you bought full access or VIP, of course, you'll get access to this talk eventually. It's a couple days after the conference ends because it just takes a while for us to process all those videos and send them to you. So that being said, if you want to reference the supply list now and tomorrow and the day after and the day after that, here's the link. You can keep this, and I plan on keeping it up for infinity, I guess, for a while. So feel free to take that, save it. It's tinyurl.com/ccc Crabitat. And that's Christine's Crab Care. CCC. All right. All right, make sure you clean all your supplies and prep them. So I have lots of cholla wood and cocoa fiber sheets and things like that. So that slowed down my process a bit, was not soaking those and letting those completely dry ahead of time. So I soak those decor items in crab safe, crab ratio, ocean salt water, same stuff you put in their tank, and it helps prevent mold. Number 3, clean your tank. So as I said, I buy all my tanks used, so it's important for me to clean them and disinfect them. So you can clean those with regular dish soap. And I know the fish keepers are probably going, what? You can't clean a tank with dish soap. So that is true if you're filling it up and putting fish in it, but we don't fill it up with water and don't put fish in it. So dish soap is completely fine for crabs, just some regular Blue Dawn or whatever you have. Or if that's too risky for you, you can use white distilled vinegar. And I find slicing fresh cut lemons is really good for getting the debris and kind of the smell off of used tanks. And then you can use a razor blade to scrape off hard water buildup. And then just whatever method you use to clean it, just rinse it really, really, really well and let it dry completely. So I'm going to talk about the toppers first and the faux rock background. So this is done with insulating foam. The brand name is Great Stuff. And it's a spray foam that comes in a can, and you spray it and it expands. So in these photos, you can see a single layer put on, and you want to do thin layers, let them dry completely, and then do another layer. If the first layer doesn't dry, that's really bad because then those chemicals are not cured and they're releasing smells and toxins into the air. So just make sure you dry it and let the thin layers dry really well. Wear gloves, do it in a well-ventilated area. I did it in my garage. And repeat the layers until you reach your desired depth or look. And then you can put in enhancement items like coconuts and cholla wood down on a dried layer and spray around it to glue it in. I learned a lesson here. Do not try pressing your cholla wood or your coconuts into wet foam. It will not work, and it's very messy and sticky and just a big headache. So you'll want to put those into dry foam and spray around it to kind of glue it in. You could also use super glue is completely crab safe once it's dried, so you could experiment, maybe do some super glue to glue those elements in, let it dry, and then continue to spray foam to finish off the look. So once you have your desired layout, you can cut and shape your foam using a knife. I tried a serrated knife, a utility knife, and a razor blade. I think I liked the razor blade best, actually. So you can see on the right-hand side here is after I already had gone on to the next steps in the process, I was like, oh, maybe I want to do more cholla wood here. So then I had to stop what I was doing, add more, and it delays the process a bit. So learn from me and make your plan ahead of time. Oh yeah, if the foam or the silicone that we'll talk about soon gets on the glass, please don't touch it. Just let it dry and then scrape it off with a razor blade later. That is best course of action, because if you try to wipe it off or clean it off while it's still wet, it's just gonna smear and make your glass really foggy. So once you have your desired layout and you've cut away the foam, one other tip that I found was to cut 1 to 2 inches away from any front facing glass. So anything that you're going to be looking at a daily basis. So you can see like here in the first picture, I cut it away a bit, because what happened, you can kind of see it on the right hand side, is when that foam is sprayed all the way up to the front facing glass, you'll never be able to cover that with anything, so it's just going to be that foam color sticking through and it doesn't look as nice. So cutting an edge away from that front facing glass, and then you're able to layer it with silicone and coconut fiber to make it look a lot more nice, a lot more natural. All right, now we get to the fun part, fun, messy part, the silicone. So we used bronze colored silicone that gives us this really nice poop color here. The brown color silicone is really nice. I got that tip from Crab Central Station, and I found it in my hardware store, and it just matches like grout and tile and stuff. So they do make it in a bunch of different colors, but I found the bronze color is like this dark brown poopy color to work best for what I was going for. So you want to glove up, put some gloves on your hands, and just smear the silicone all over every nook and cranny of the foam as much as you can. And do this in thin layers. Let each layer dry. And it takes a long time to dry for the silicone. I'd say 24 to 36 hours before applying a new layer. Because again, if you cover an old layer before it has a chance to dry, those chemicals have not cured. The silicone hasn't cured, and it's just gonna release this really strong smelling odor. Do as many layers as you can, which I'll touch on later, but the goal here with the silicone is, because we know that silicone is crab safe, is putting a barrier between that fun to pick foam and your hermit crabs. So do as many layers as you have time for, as you can afford. I estimate that I did 4 to 6 layers throughout the background. But if I was going to do it again, I would do 8 to 12 layers, honestly. It really does just protect the foam more. Don't fill your cavities with silicone. This is really tempting, but you can kind of see here on this, like, where there's holes and definition. I thought I was being super cool to bring this definition to the rocks, but it's hard to get into those cavities to cover them. But what you don't want to do, which I tried, was just filling that cavity with the silicone. And what happens there is that it doesn't have access to air, so it doesn't dry. So probably like 3 or 4 days later, I had decided I wanted to reshape some things. So I started cutting, and I reached one of these cavity pockets that I had filled with silicone, and it was still wet and still smelly. So just do the surface, the exterior surface of the foam, and don't fill in cavities with the silicone, is my advice. Again, if silicone gets on your glass, just let it dry and then scrape it off. You can see on this top right photo, it's like all smeared and stuff. That was really hard to get off. And yeah, it takes a lot more silicone than you think. I think I used approximately 12 to 15 tubes for this project, and the price of those tubes were about 3 to 5 USD. So it's not as cheap as you might think. All right, so then here's honestly one of the funnest parts is on the final layer of your silicone, once everything is covered, unlike these photos, I didn't have a picture to share, but cover all the foam so none of it's showing. And then on your last thin layer of silicone, toss completely dry cocoa fiber that you'd put in their substrate. You can either get the bag stuff or the brick stuff and let it completely dry, like dry. Like it feels like it's just like confetti at this point. And you just want to toss that on into the silicone and press it down a little bit. Let it dry in 24 hours. And then what I did is I tilted the tanks upright, and I took an old paintbrush and kind of brushed off anything loose. And then that gave me a good picture of what had actually stuck. And then I repeated the process. I added another thin layer of silicone. I pressed more cocoa fiber into that fresh layer and just repeat this process. All right, now into the more fun stuff. This is what my topper looked like all finished when I had just finished it and put it up. So I don't have a good close-up of the flowers and leaves and stuff, but what I did was I punctured a hole deep into the foam with a knife, and then this did a little X on the foam, like where I wanted the flower stems to go. And this the holes close up really fast, so you gotta kind of be quick with this. But I applied silicone into that hole a little bit and then around the stems, and then pressed the flowers in there, and then did silicone around the stems of the plants. And that's worked all right for those. We'll get into what worked, what didn't later, but that was my process for attaching the plants into the upper background, and those are all fake. All right, for the bottom, I chose not to do the foam background on the bottom for a couple reasons. One, I thought if it went horribly wrong, I didn't want to ruin my biggest, most expensive tank. Secondly, if the crabs destroyed the foam in the uppers, it's much easier to remove an upper, and they still have everything they need in the lower tank. So this was my rationale. So I did not do foam background on the bottom tank. Instead, I used egg crate, also known as ceiling light diffuser panels, on the bottom. I had done this in my previous tank, and I didn't like all the white plastic showing through in the back. I really wanted a more natural look. So I took cocoa core sheets and zip tied those to the background, as you can see. And then I attached cholla wood and flowers and made it pretty on the background to give it more dimension. And then also on the bottom, also using egg crate, is for supporting the water pools, I created an egg crate stand, as you can see. And that stand on its own is super flimsy and not going to hold the pools at all. But we add substrate, the sand, plus the egg crate, and it's going to give it a lot more stability. At least it has so far. And my hope here was just, to give more secure tunneling and molting space underneath the tank. So this is what it looks like under the sand. You can't see that in my tank at all, but because of the sand, I've put sand kind of in front to hide the white egg crate, and there's sand underneath there for extra tunneling and molting space. Yes, the sound of the egg crate scraping along the glass while you're doing this will make your ears bleed. It's a terrible, terrible sound. So you've been warned. Something that I knew that I wanted in my Crabitat build was good viewing lights. And so these are strip LED lights. They're super popular right now. People use them in their bedrooms or on, computer monitors or things like that. They're pretty common and inexpensive. I used these. I chose to use these because they have a timer. They're pretty inexpensive. They gave me what I wanted. And these have a sticky back to them. And as you can see here that I left the paper, this says 3M, on the backs of these because I wasn't going to use that sticky side. Because if I had done the sticky side down on the Crabitat, then I would be lighting up my ceiling, and that's not what I wanted. So what I did was I left this paper on and I just pointed them down using command hooks. These are command hooks that are used for like Christmas lights, and I actually siliconed those on. So I put a dab of clear silicone under the command hooks on the top of the tank, and then I just wedged the strip lights in there because I wanted it also removable. So they're removable. And then they kind of did this weird bubble thing. So on the side, you can kind of see I have some Velcro pieces just securing them down, but again, keeping it completely removable in the case of emergency or maintenance. I just need to access the tank. I can still do that. So my tank is heated with 2 Ultratherm heat pads, one on the back and one on the left side. You can see that on the back I have insulated with Reflectix, which is a insulating bubble wrap, best way to put it. And then on the one on the side, I didn't put that over the foam. I just put it on the one side to create a nice little heat pocket, which my hermit crabs absolutely love. They're usually over there, especially in the winter, hanging out on that side of the tank. And my heat pads are regulated with an Inkbird thermostat, which is listed in my supply list, which I love because if it gets hot, it'll turn off the heat pads, but if it gets cool again, it turns on the heat pads. So that's really nice to have, especially living in Minnesota. In the spring and fall, our temperatures can vary widely when we don't have air conditioning. So as you can see, I didn't need to insulate it on the foam part or put a heat pad on the foam part because I thought the foam background would be too thick for the heat to go through. So I chose to put it below that foam and on the side where there is no foam. One of the latches broke while we were building it, so I found a childproof latch lock that I had, and I use that to secure one of the doors now. And as we know, suction cups just don't work well in the Crabitat, and I thought I could fix that by siliconing the suction cup inside of it. That did not work either. So I was left to use the handy dandy command strips, which I have had success in. without fail. And the trick to these is making sure there's no humidity, that the glass is clean, and using outdoor strips, which I have linked in the supply list. So the outdoor strips are a little more resistant to moisture and high temperatures. So those work great for me in the crab tank. All right, it's time to talk about the good and the not so good. What I learned and what I wish I did differently. So, on the good side, of course, it's beautiful. My friends compliment me when they come over. I can't deny it. It's gorgeous. I've never seen my hermit crabs more. They're super active in the new tank. It's lighted so I can see them, and I have filtered pools now, which was a must have for me. And I hate changing crab water, so now I have pools to help me do that less. And that means less maintenance, sort of, which leads me into the next part of it, which is the not so good. I knew that hermit crabs were destructive. I knew they would redecorate, but I did not give them credit for how quickly they would redecorate. So on the left is my tank that, like right after I built it, and then on the right is last week. And as you can see, there's vines missing from the toppers. They pulled those down within the first 8 hours. And I think the culprit of that is because the flowers have stayed nicely, and because they have like good long stems on those, I think that helped them. And then the vines, I only put like this much, couple of inches in the foam, stuck that in. So I don't think I put enough of it inside the foam to hold it. And also because the vines are connected on were connected on both sides, I'm wondering if the hermit crabs kind of got stuck in them, so they just ripped them out to get free from the vines. I definitely do more non-vining plants and flowers. Okay, as you can see here, they have chipped away at the foam a bit. Um, One of the things that I think I did well in the Crabitat is I gave them lots of homes and cavities through the coconut hut. So I have 5 coconut halves in the rock background that they really love camping out in. And I've talked with other crab keepers who have done foam backgrounds, and they have reported to me that their crabs have burrowed into the foam, and it creates this big mess. I think because I gave my hermit crabs their own sorts of pre-made cavities, that they didn't need to create their own cave. The only real damage of the foam, besides some accidental or incidental rubbing here and there, is really where they're making that cave or cavity a little bit bigger, because I have a pretty big boy in there. He's a jumbo crab, and I think they just made it a little bit more roomier for them in that coconut cavity. And so that's in almost every place that I have a coconut hut. But I think if I didn't have those coconut halves, that they would have definitely tried burrowing. So yeah, I would do more coconut halves or bigger cavities, pre-made cavities for them to kind of prevent them from making their own. Something else that really, really aggravated me was that I had a lot of moss in the tank in each of those coconut halves and other places, and almost immediately they dragged all of that moss into the water pools and like kicked it out of the shells and out of the coconut halves, and it broke 2 of my filters, so they have lost their moss privileges. All right, friends, here is the day I did not want to talk about, but I felt I would be giving you an inaccurate picture if I did not talk about it. So, this is the day that I wanted to toss in the towel completely, and this was a couple months ago, and a couple months after I had built this tank. Um, I woke up one morning, was walking out of my bedroom, and I heard running water, much louder than it should have been. And the saltwater pool had only about an inch of water at the bottom, and the rest of it was missing. So immediately I went into emergency survival mode and I counted my crabs. Thankfully, all my crabs were not molting, so I didn't have to worry about any molters. Um, so I dismantled. Here's kind of proof that the toppers do come off. I took off the toppers and I removed the old pool and I checked my substrate, fully expecting a flood. I actually found the complete opposite. My substrate was so dry. I have a video here to show you just how dry it was. It should not be this dry. And so, one, it's just super confusing that it wasn't just the top inch or two of dryness, like the first 10 inches of substrate was all completely dry. And then the bottom half of the substrate, the 3 or 4 inches at the bottom, was not flooded at all. That was more of a consistency that I would expect. So this was just a really frustrating and humbling experience because as a more experienced crab keeper, I did not expect to run into substrate and humidity drying out issues. I had never experienced that before. So what ended up happening is that I had to remove these toppers so I could get in there, and that's how I found out the substrate was super dry. And then I basically remixed the top 10 inches of my hermit crab tank and added more coconut fiber that will better hold the moisture. Um, so, living in Minnesota, my crab tank is actually up against my baseboard heater, and I think that's the biggest culprit. Just it's super dry in our house in winter. And this tank, because I have the two terrariums that I've never had before, all along the terrarium door is a small crack on 4 sides. Plus, it has ventilation holes. Plus, everywhere a tank meets another tank, there's a small crack. So that left enough cracks, I suppose, to completely dry out my tank. So, and the weird part was that my humidity levels was reading as within within normal levels. So that was just a really unfortunate and frustrating issue that I had with this tank. So what I did to remedy that, of course, I remixed the top substrate and then I added that duct tape that I told you about all around the perimeter and filled in any holes that I could. And you can see in this right picture, I added some Reflectix in between the tanks to create a moisture barrier to keep the tank at the right humidity and moisture level. Lastly, really the only problems I've had with the tank is that it took 3 times as long and cost twice as much as I had planned. Just every time I got a new idea that added, more time, and I would order something and I'd have to wait for it to come in. And I had so many trips to Home Depot for more silicone. So, yeah, it was just kept adding on to timeline and cost. So, if I was going to do a big tank like this again, I would definitely do a better job of planning out my budget and planning the tank ahead of time so I know exactly what I'm building to kind of speed along some of that process. I hope this presentation inspires you to create and make your own hermit crab tank and improve it in any way that you can, maybe taking away some things from today's presentation.